Joining us on the phones right now, Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak, good friend of the program. Matt, how are you today?
Doing pretty great. Pretty good, Chad. How are you?
Doing great. Appreciate your time today. Before we get to some of the national headlines, I've been keeping up with your petition effort that you have going on in Austin. Because again, if those of us out here in Lubbock, I think we've heard the discussion that's going on and the talk in the really the outrage from both the left and the right down in Austin over the mayor's decision and the council's decision in your city to just let homeless people camp wherever they want to camp, Matt. And you've got a petition to target that, right?
I do, and we're honestly really just targeting people who live in Austin or in and around the area, so it's not really as much for folks up in Lubbock. But
I just think it's interesting.
I know you do. I'm kind of amazed that anyone thinks allowing homeless people to camp in public in the city of Austin is a good idea. And I don't know that I've ever seen an issue that's had more intense and broader opposition than this issue. It's not ideological. It's not partisan. People just simply do not understand why the city wants to let people camp and use tents, create waste. There are public health and public safety concerns. It affects, the tourism downtown. I mean, it is bad from so many different angles. And in about 5.5 days, we've accumulated over 13,000 signatures in an online petition with no advertising whatsoever. So we'll keep pushing. This is all leading towards an August 8th city council meeting where they're purportedly going to be reviewing this decision, which took effect July 1st. So we'll see where it goes. So far, the mayor did an op-ed in the Statesman yesterday, and he kind of doubled down and defended the decision. So it's not looking encouraging, but we'll keep pushing and we'll keep trying.
And Matt, I applaud your effort. And again, the petition. Don't go and sign the petition if you don't live in Austin, because then you're just going to screw everything up. So it's just but watch this, because this is, to me, Matt. You got other cities in Texas that maybe not on the scale of Austin as far as the homeless problem. But Austin got this idea from another city, and it's always possible that Dallas or Houston or whatever other city will pick this up and run with it if it continues to be allowed.
That's right, and look, I mean, I want to say that it's easy to go after the homeless community, and they don't have a lot of advocates, that they can't really mobilize. They have all kinds of challenges. For me, I don't think this policy is good for homeless people. I don't think allowing someone to sleep on a sidewalk 95 degrees at 10 p.m. in the summer is good for them. Yeah. These people need to be, number one, screened for mental health and drug and alcohol abuse, and if they have either of those, they need to get help from the city and from nonprofits. For everyone else, they need to have housing, and I'm not talking about housing in your neighborhood, but shelters, and they need a roof over their head to the extent we can possibly do it, and they need to be moving towards work and self-sufficiency. And so my concern is that this policy will create a permanent class of homeless citizen in Austin, rather than really try to move them from where they are to where we want them to be, where they want to be. I doubt these people really want to be doing this. There may be a small percentage that, for whatever reason, want to live this way, but I think the vast majority of them want the dignity of work, and want to move towards being able to be self-sufficient. So this is just such a disastrous policy. Just in the first month, we've seen calls to 311, the non-emergency police line, skyrocket. So you're having police officers focus on these kinds of situations rather than, trying to prevent violent crime. It's been a disaster for Austin, and unfortunately it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Visiting with Matt Mackowiak here on the Chad Hasty Show. Let's take our attention to the national side. A deal was struck yesterday, Matt, on spending and a rise in the debt ceiling for the next 2 years, and it spends a whole lot of money. The question that I think some voters are going to ask eventually is, what happened to the Republicans that were for cutting spending and for trying to rein in the debt?
It's a good question. It's a fair question. I'm not sure I have a good answer. I think that the reality is Republicans talk a lot about the debt and fiscal issues when we have a Democratic president. When we have a Republican president, they don't seem to care much about it. And, we have a $22 trillion national debt. We're running $1 trillion annual deficits. I don't know. It's possible it's happened at least once in our history, but it's extremely rare. And now we're now doing it every year, and no one seems to care about it. Look, on the fiscal side, this deal is not very good. It increases spending, I think, $300 or $350 billion, and there's like $75 billion in offsets. Takes off the sequester, increases the debt limit for a year and a half. Past the election, basically it takes all the brakes off of the spending train. Now, let's look at it through a political lens, right? If it takes a debt limit showdown off the table, that's probably pretty good politically for the House Democratic majority, the Senate Republican majority, and President Trump. So we don't have that kind of sort of Russian roulette with the economy. So I think ultimately no one really wanted that fight going, over the next year and a half, given how divided Washington is. So I think that's why all sides agreed to this. But, for actual taxpayers, sometimes we don't really connect the debt and the deficit to how it affects real people, right? These just sound like numbers. It's hard to even conceive of what $1 trillion is. The problem is that, just like your credit card, if you start having massive credit card balances, you're going to have massive interest payments. And with a $22 trillion national debt, we're going towards a place where the interest payments are going to get beyond our ability to pay, and they're going to continue to consume larger and larger shares of our annual budget. And so, that can affect the strength of the dollar, can affect inflation, can affect, prices for things that you need on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. So I don't know what to tell you. The president just doesn't seem to care much about this, to be honest. Hasn't really tried to rein in spending, certainly hasn't been willing to support entitlement reforms. And so for now, things on the spending side are going to continue to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, and you nailed it. No Republican. I mean, there's very few Republicans who are even talking about. It was just a few years ago that we heard all this talk about how the economy would collapse, that this is horrible for the United States, and now nothing. Everything's fine and dandy. And I assume that the next time the Republicans will really get together on this and start talking about the debt will be when and if a Democrat is elected president.
Yeah, I imagine that's when it'll come back. One thing I will say is that the size of the deficit and the size of the debt are always must be considered based on the strength of the economy, right? And the stronger the economy is, the less concerning the debt and the deficit are. But the problem is that a strong economy doesn't stay static. It doesn't stay in place forever. We're seeing to a certain extent a global slowdown begin. The U.S. economy remains pretty strong. I think it may slow down the rest of this year and to some extent next year, while it continues to grow just at a slower pace. But, if we get to a point where maybe we get into a recession in 2021 or something like that, then this spending problem is going to get worse. And so, I don't know what we have to do to incentivize both parties. The problem is that you have elected officials who want to get reelected who care about today. They don't really care that much about tomorrow. And so they don't want to take the hit for reducing spending or reducing entitlement payouts in the short term to benefit the fiscal circumstance for the country in the long term. And we've got to start getting elected officials in place who are more interested in the long term. We have to stop short-term thinking. Right now, everyone wants to spend what they want to spend for whatever reason they want to spend it, and that's obviously not the way that we're going to get out of this mess.
Matt, next week I'll be off the air, so I won't be visiting with you next week. So I want to get just your thoughts ahead of the Democrat debates. What are you going to be looking for specifically?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, we saw that basically Julian Castro and Kamala Harris, and to a lesser extent maybe someone like Cory Booker, had sort of breakout moments last time, and they gave themselves some new momentum and new fundraising. Will there be a different breakout star of these debates? Will someone, really have a bad debate? I mean, I think Beto O'Rourke had a fairly bad debate last time. Have to see kind of how he does. He's not having to debate against Julian Castro, so they're not going to have that interaction. To me, that's number one. Sort of, is there a breakout breakout star. Number two, you do have some head-to-head matchups within the two nights that are going to be interesting. Biden and Kamala Harris are on the same night again. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are on the same night this time. So it'll be interesting to see if those folks mix it up. And then third, I think, is does Biden bounce back? Right? He's still the front runner. He's a weak front runner. His polling lead has diminished. He's at risk of losing his national lead in the polls and maybe moving into second place. Does he show that he still has the ability, to run the table and become the nominee? Is he going to be sort of quick on his feet? Will he defend his record? Will he attack anyone else? How does he handle difficult subjects? So, it's going to be a lot to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. And we're obviously still pretty early here, but this is the last debate where you're going to have 20 people, right? Yeah. Next time in September, you're going to have a smaller number when the polling threshold doubles and the donor threshold doubles. You're going to have 5 or 10 people probably can't qualify. I think only 6 people have qualified so far. So the clown show is going to kind of come down to a much more smaller number, and I think the race will change because of that.
Matt Mackowiak joining us here on the Chad Hasty Show. Matt, tell folks how they can sign up for your newsletter, and also tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, the newsletter is called Must Read Texas. We take all the top news from around the state, from all the different newspapers and news organizations, put it in one clean, easy-to-read email, and make sure our subscribers don't miss anything. That email is sent every weekday before 9 a.m. You can subscribe or sign up for a free one-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. The podcast is called Mac on Politics. It's available in the iTunes Store, on Google Play, on Stitcher, and on Spotify. We did another conversation with a Democratic consultant in the most recent episode, Christian Hanley. And on Friday, I'll be taping an interview with Tim Alberta, who just wrote a great new book, American Carnage, which traces kind of the transformation of the Republican Party in the Trump era.
Yeah, I've been reading that. I've been reading that book. It's fantastic.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation, so you can check that out on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
Have a good one. That's Matt Mackowiak here on the Chad Hasty Show.